The world today is facing serious crises, wars, environmental disasters, inequality, rapid fire technological changes, all of which is why thousands of people have gathered where I am here in Doha, Qatar for others, for the Second World Summit for Social Development to strengthen partnerships and recommit to social progress and to achieve the goals that were outlined in the UN Agenda for Sustainable Development. That's the framework that the governments agreed back in 2015 that they would achieve by 2030. But the progress to do that is seriously lagging. And now, at the midpoint, those 17 goals that you see here on this slide, which include eradicating poverty, achieving peace, ensuring decent work, health, and education for all, must be achieved. Now, education is Sustainable Development Goal number 4, and it's the focus of this webinar, which is entitled Higher Education, Value Proposition for Inclusive Futures for All. At this summit, and in this event, we're looking for solutions that achieve the promised progress in social development. A solution popularly used in the UN community is in this one word, multilateralism. What does that mean? It means all stakeholders working together. This webinar emphasizes one group that needs to have a bigger voice, and that is science, from academics and higher education. Science needs to have more of a seat at the table to contribute solutions to impact policy and affect social change. So in this webinar, you're going to hear from academics and policymakers about how to do that. This is all very relevant to me. I'm Dr. Judy Kuriansky, your moderator, as I have been a senior research scientist at Columbia University Psychiatric Institute and on the Scientists Committee for Public Information, and a professor for 22 years of psychology and education at Columbia University Teachers College, teaching graduate students there and around the world about the Sustainable Development Goals that you saw there on that slide. At the United Nations, also for 22 years, I've been on the civil society side, representing the International Association of Applied Psychology, and currently on the government side as an advisor to the mission of Sierra Leone. In all those years that I've been advocating about teaching about the SDGs to students, professional groups, and the public, and also in my media roles as a reporter and a columnist. The main organizers of this webinar are many, and they're all relevant to this topic, and so it's good to know who they are. University College Dublin and the Government of Ireland SDG Champions Program, and many other co-organizers represented by the speakers you will hear from, who are from a wide variety of organizations related to education and to science. So they include the Ministry of Information and Civic Education in Sierra Leone, the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, who organized this amazing webinar, the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation in the United Arab Emirates, UN Academic Impact, UNESCO, UNITAR, and the UN Major Group for Children and Youth, the International Science Council, the International Association of Applied Psychology, Majma University in Saudi Arabia, and York University in Canada. This webinar is in a couple of parts: a high-level segment of speakers, a musical interlude, and a roundtable of solutions, experts posing solutions, a Q&A session, and closing remarks. So as you listen, we would like you to think about what solutions that you and your organizations and institutions can come up with that would be valuable for participation. So now I would like to introduce a statement by the Minister of Information and Civic Education that is going to be presented by Timothy Sam, who is the head of partnerships at the ministry. Now, welcome, Timothy. Let me say a few words about Minister Ba. Was appointed by the Sierra Leone amazing President Julius Maada Bio to be the minister. of Information and Civic Education for the Republic of Sierra Leone, a position that he has very well earned, since he has had incredible valuable experience as a leader in civil society and academics. So picture this: at the tender age of 15, after suffering from that drawn-out civil war in Sierra Leone, he founded the Children's Forum Network for children's voices to be included in peace and reconciliation. That organization still survives. But he also co-founded A World at School, which is very relevant to this about education and purposeful, motivating students to get engaged in making a better society. And he even co-founded, along with Gordon Brown, you may remember as the former British Prime Minister, A World at School, about access to education. On top of all of this, he's media savvy. I mean, he executive produced a UN-sponsored children's radio program. And he's done so much for SDG 16 on peace, SDG 4 on education, and SDG 5 on protection and gender equality of women and girls, which refers to education and the empowerment of girls. He has a master's degree in international peace studies from the Kroc Institute in Notre Dame, and he recently became an adjunct professor at Columbia University School of Public Health. Given all this, he got a Heroes Award from Safe Magazine. That's very well deserved there. And the ministry is now organizing an upcoming 3-day extravaganza to celebrate all the work about civic education and National Day in Sierra Leone. And you know all about that, Tim. And so over to you to present the minister's statement.
Thank you very much, Dr. Judy. What an amazing profile you just read. And I'm particularly delighted to let you know that I have been part of this dream and testimony that you have read about Minister Chernoba. As I currently serve as his chief of staff, as partnership and head of his delivery team, I think there is no better person than to read the statement than myself sit here this particular afternoon. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity given to the ministry to be part of this initiative and to add our voice to such an important summit like this on social development, which is being held in Doha. The minister regrets, first of all, that he is not able to make it at this time. As I speak to you, he currently sits in cabinet, and there have been some also emergency declaration being done in the country on the fight against synthetic drugs, kush, which also prevented him from really attending this all-important summit and webinar today. With that, I want to straight away move into the statement, and I also want to let you know, Dr. Judy, at 15, when Cherno founded that organization in Sierra Leone, I was a founding member of that organization called the Children's Forum Network. And today that organization has lived to the expectation, and thousands and millions of children in Sierra Leone have read a statement being presented by Minister Ba as a contribution to this particular discussion today. It is an honor to address this distinguished gathering from Freetown, sunny, bright city, as we join global leaders, scholars, and practitioners in shaping a new vision for higher education, only that deserves inclusive future for all of us. We all know 30 years ago, after the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development, our collective challenge remained clear. How do we make education not merely a privilege for few, but a transformative force that bridges, uplifts communities, and strengthens democracy in an age of uncertainty, technology, and rapid change? For us in Sierra Leone, the question is deeply personal. Our nation has lived through the consequences of exclusion, when education was not accessible, when history was not told through our own lens, and when young people were left out of the national story. We learned through painful experiences that no society can be stable, inclusive, or prosperous if its citizens are not educated, engaged, and empowered. That is why, under the leadership of His Excellency, the President Julius Maada Bio, Sierra Leone has made human capital development the cornerstone of our national transformation. Investing in 22% of our national budget in education, prioritizing free quality education schooling, and now expanding civic and digital learning to prepare our youth for global citizenship in the 21st century. As the main focus for this webinar focuses on three things. One, which is quality education and lifelong learning. Today, we see higher education not as an endpoint, but as part of a continuum, a lifelong journey that connects knowledge to citizens and learn to live. In Sierra Leone, the Ministry of Civic Education and Information is pioneering a digital civic education transformation, which integrates our national curriculum, but at the same time with technology, storytelling, and decolonized history. Just to also let you know that we are currently equipping young people with the tools to only not access information, but to interpret questions and use it responsibly through interactive events like quizzes, debates, digital storytelling, youth-led media, and also nurturing critical thinking for our citizens who can safeguard democracy, peace, and social cohesion. This is our contribution to the goal 4 of the SDG, quality education. But it's not only the investment in the shared global future, but values, understanding our divisions, and also civic responsibilities over misinformation. The second focus of this webinar looks at technology and artificial intelligence. Excellencies here and civil society leaders, ladies and gentlemen, the future of learning is inseparable from technology. But technology without equity can be driven in the wrong direction. This is why we'll be happy to partner with the government of Ireland on the SDG Champion University College in Dublin in establishing digital education transformation hub in Africa. Especially, we look forward to that of it in Sierra Leone. We know that this will be a groundbreaking partnership that will leverage on artificial intelligence and digital information to advance inclusive education and sustainable skills for youth across the continent. Our belief that this hub will bridge between higher education, governance, and society, training young leaders to become architects of digital public infrastructure, creators of AI-driven learning tools, and for green and sustainable economies. For Sierra Leone, this is more than a project, and we are interested to be part of this journey. The third aspect of this webinar today is innovation in finance. The third focus is equally crucial. The reason is the promises of education and technology will only be realized when finance models are reimagined to serve nations. This is why Sierra Leone supports initiatives like the Sevilla Platform for Actions. We know it will align for knowledge and capacity building. As a global financial architecture evolves, developing nations must have a seat at the table, not only as beneficiaries of aid, but as creators, co-creators for sustainable financing systems that ensure learning, innovation, and social protection for all. This is our message. At the heart of Sierra Leone's participation in this summit, it is simple yet profound message that digital transformation is not only about technology, but it is about the people. It is about building trust between citizens and their institution. It is about restoring public's faith in democracy through transparent, participatory learning. And it's about ensuring that every child from my country to the least developed country learn how to dream, lead, and equipped with both wisdom and the global competence as well. Through partnership with UNESCO, with UNDP, UNFPA, Plan International, and also all the stakeholders that have come together to do this webinar today, Sierra Leone is now showing a multi-stakeholder platforms where we make civic education the foundation for responsible governance and resilient society. In conclusion, we are calling for a collective action, not only that after we finish this conversation, we drop it, but rather we want to invite all of us to make this conversation inclusive. Therefore, we are deliberate on higher education values proposition for inclusive future for all. Let us remember that the ultimate purpose of education is not only to prepare people for job, but to prepare them for life, for citizenship and leadership. We must therefore move from education for survival to education of transformation, from isolated national strategy to global partnership for inclusive innovation. And so from Sierra Leone, I offer this call to action. Let us invest not only in classrooms, but in conscience. Let us code not only machines, but morals. Let us finance not only infrastructure, but imagination. If we can do this together, then education will not merely respond to the future, it will define it. On this note, I want to particularly say thank you very much for the partners, for us coming together to bring this webinar together. And we are hopeful that this conversation will help to open questions, challenge the status quo, and bring education on the table where everybody will be inclusive. Thank you very much. God bless Sierra Leone and God bless us for our shared values. Thank you.
I'm calling for a standing ovation for you, Tim. That was astounding. You are indeed the perfect person to have presented that because you're at the heart of the ministry. And speaking of for Minister Ba, that was just so perfect. And Sierra Leone, that I'm proud to represent as an advisor to the mission, and is a perfect country to be speaking about solutions, and you presented them. You addressed the three aspects of this webinar in terms of including IT and including youth and financing models, because after all, we need the money about that. And you addressed the two Ps that are so relevant that we talk about at the UN, people and partnership, inviting everybody as you did, Tim, for collective action. And finally, it is so important, the message that you said about education for transformation, which is really critical. And by the way, President Bio, the president of Sierra Leone, has been a leader in exactly that. He has co-chaired the Transforming Education Summit. So thank you to Minister Ba, thank you to Tim, thank you to the president, thank you to Sierra Leone. And being such a groundbreaking country perfectly. And we move to another country. Actually, this is such a perfect webinar of having two countries that are leaders in this entire field of education, sustainable development, IT, what the future is. So from Sierra Leone, we move to the United Arab Emirates. And our next presentation that will be read by the person who has put this webinar together, bless you, Patrick Paul Walsh, is from His Excellency Jamal bin Huareb, the CEO of the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation, launched by His Highness MBR, that's his initials, which he likes to be referred to. So we will indeed recognize that, because what he's contributing is so amazing to the world. And His Excellency is also the Vice President and the Prime Minister of the UAE and the ruler of Dubai. That's His Highness MBR is the Vice President and the PM of the UAE and the ruler of Dubai. Now, at the foundation, His Excellency develops and funds pioneering research and innovative initiatives in the UAE and also the wider Arab region. His Excellency is also entrenched in leadership roles in the education. He has a list of so many credentials on the executive committee of the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Global Initiatives, the vice chair of the National Curriculum Development Committee, and on the advisory of so many college institutions, the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at the UAE University, a member of the Global Leadership Council of Said Business School at Oxford University, on the governing board of the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, and the founder of his own self-named Center for Studies. On top of all of this, I must mention to you, I find this, you'll find this interesting, that he is a poet in Arabic tradition known as the People's Poetry about Bedouin life. And he's also a historian, having documented Arab and Islamic heritage and culture of Dubai and the other Emirates, and also the larger Persian region. And in media too, he was a board member of the Dubai Media Incorporation, did a TV show called The Narrator in Arabic that spotlights public figures. He's a newspaper columnist and a co-founder of a press that has produced several publications. And he's also written his diaries. So this historical concept, the poetic concept, and the experience in business is really showing in the statement that is going to be read by Patrick Paul Walsh, who has organized this webinar and on behalf of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And so over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Dr. Judy. A lovely introduction of His Excellency Jamal, and he gives his apologies. He just got unexpectedly pulled aside, so he asked me to read the statement to you all. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to join you to discuss how higher education can help build inclusive futures for all. At the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation, we believe that knowledge for the public good is the foundation stone of education at all levels. Education's highest purpose is to make knowledge a shared asset that benefits all humanity. Yet today, our global knowledge base remains uneven. Much of the world's digital knowledge exists in only a few languages and often reflects a narrow range of cultures and histories. Large parts of humanity are underrepresented in this digital landscape. Even when knowledge is available, it is not always accessible or properly archived. This creates an inefficient and unequal knowledge market where supply and demand do not meet and where knowledge is not always orientated towards the global public good. At MBRF, we are working to address these gaps through initiatives that make knowledge more open and equitable. For example, the Knowledge Index developed with UNDP helps nations measure and advance their knowledge and innovation systems. The Knowledge Summit brings together global leaders and thinkers to exchange ideas that shape education and sustainable development. Our Future Skills Academy equips youth with the competencies needed for the jobs of the future. And the Dubai Knowledge Hub provides open access digital libraries in Arabic and other languages, ensuring that knowledge truly serves everyone. We are keen to partner with universities, UN agencies, and higher education leaders to strengthen the creation and use of knowledge for peace and sustainable development. Together, we can ensure that higher education becomes a driver of equity, inclusion, and opportunity, and not just for some societies, but for all. Finally, our shared responsibility is to empower the next generation. Young people everywhere need future skills and meaningful employment. By aligning education with these needs, we will build the foundations for more resilient, prosperous, and peaceful societies. In conclusion, knowledge is humanity's most powerful resource, but only when it is shared openly and used for the common good. At MBRF, we remain committed to working with all partners to create a world where knowledge empowers everyone and where education truly builds inclusive futures for all. Thank you very much for listening.
And thank you so much, Patrick, for reading that important statement that we've now gotten an idea from two different regions, from the African region and the Middle East region, about how these solutions for what the whole principle of this webinar is and what we need for progression in social development is about, and how this is really being worked on in two important parts of the world. So thank you so much for that. We move from governments now to also what UN agencies, important representatives from UN agencies are doing. And I'll turn it over to our next keynote from Katrin Cole, who serves as the chair of the hub of SDG 10, which is reducing inequalities at the UN Academic Impact. And she's also the co-chair of what's called the UNESCO Chair in Reorienting Education Towards Sustainability at York University in Canada. She's also the focal point for Sustainable Development Goal 4 that I told you is about quality education within the Higher Education and Research for Sustainable Development Global Cluster that's led by the International Association of Universities. So you see how education is really her topic, that she's representing so many important and major organizations in the UN system there that's relevant to our webinar. So, but before she speaks, talk about higher education, which is our topic here. You've got Katrin, who has many academic degrees. She has a PhD in education from the International Islamic University in Malaysia, an MBA in management, and a degree in corporate psychology, which is amazing to me as a psychologist. So over to you, Katrin. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and hello from Doha to everyone today. It's such a pleasure, and it's always lovely when you're following speakers that you actually agree with. So it's great to see how we are around the world are actually aligning in our ideas for higher education. As I'm coming from a higher education perspective, I would like to point out that often the discussion around questions of education access overrides other question, because yes, it is extremely important that we create access and that we create these opportunities for all. But at the same time, we are living in a world where education attainment does still correlate with unsustainable lifestyles. So education for sustainable development is an approach to education that aims to change that. As we are looking also at education for sustainable development as a policy concept within the SDGs, it is determined a key enabler, not only a key enabler in order to provide access and education quality for all, but education for sustainable development is recognized as being a key enabler for all other 16 SDGs. And that's why we are well placed to be also here in Doha at the World Summit for Social Development. Higher education within the education levels plays a specific role, because not only are we graduating the future leaders of tomorrow, because in most cases, let's be honest, those people who lead in government, in business and industry, but also the artists and poets, those are the people that have had the opportunity to go to higher education. So there's a huge responsibility for higher education. And at the same time, higher education is a stakeholder. It is a key actor in many discussions. The higher education community, through their professors, through all of their representatives, are often considered honest brokers. When you say you're a professor, you're speaking from a university, people have an initial sense of trust in most countries, and that's an enormous responsibility to start with. However, in global action plans, such as the SDGs, higher education is often I would say from an academic perspective, rather reduced to creating access to higher education, which is great, but often requested to create research and science to fill those knowledge gaps. But higher education, through its holistic role, as I just explained, has a much more important role. And that's why we met with a number, and then could I have the next slide, please, Yash? We have taken up the conversation with many of the higher education actors, hosted by United Nations Academic Impact, but together with SDSN, with the IAU, with the International Science Council, the German Research and Innovation Network in New York, but also with UNESCO, UNITA, and HESI, really bringing all the UN stakeholders together to change the position of higher education in the discussion, not only for the remaining years of the SDGs, but also in light of the upcoming post-2030 agenda, which will hit us in 2031. And so what we would like to present is what we would like to achieve is that we don't only regain the trust in higher education, but also position higher education as that important stakeholder in any kind of future discussion. So in July of 2025, during the high-level political forum, we were able to bring these organizations that you're also seeing on the slide, but also representatives from youth, from civil society, and other UN agencies together in a room to really discuss what is our purpose, what is the trust that we need to create more knowledge, but not just create any knowledge, but create knowledge that respects the epistemic origins of different knowledge systems, that respects our different worldviews, and that can not only produce add-on knowledge, but new knowledge as our current system continues to fail to achieve sustainable development. And so we had this initial conversation in July, and if I could have the next slide. We were able, during the HLPF, we had 48 seats in the room. All of these 48 seats were taken, and we were able to develop an initial consensus statement. It's a draft consensus statement that covered thematic areas. And as you can see here, under the influence of current global trends of threats to science, threats to higher education, democratic values, trust, and responsibility was one of the big themes that came out, but also the integration of sustainability and the SDGs in higher education, and how higher education can be a role model for a sustainable society and show that it actually works. Knowledge, inclusion, decolonization were big themes, but also science, technology, and innovation, and including how do we actually deal with AI in a meaningful way? Is AI just another sustainability challenge? And last but not least, the necessary systemic change that we need in governance and funding in order to move towards sustainable development. And if I could have the next slide, as we move forward, and that's why this initial meeting will be a broader opportunity, we will be moving forward to engage with our initial draft consensus statement and offer an online survey. So we're going to be moving in consultation to move this initial statement, 48 people in the room, but also many of the named UN agencies involved. How can this statement be improved? What did we miss? How can we become to get to an even better foundation to then be the stakeholder, to get the seat at the table that we're imagining for higher education, to be part of the discussions over the remaining years of the SDGs, and to bring forward a much stronger role for higher education as a society stakeholder for the post-2030 agenda. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity, and I hope many of you will engage with us over the coming months and years to well position higher education. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Katrin. That was so exciting. I'm just thrilled about this opening segment of keynote speeches and how we've seen that this is possible when we talk so much around the UN and in the world about how we need solutions, to hear from the country of Sierra Leone and to hear from UAE. And now, Katrin, that you have really focused and shared with us solutions, which is what this segment of the summit that we're at is about, and talked about some specific actions that you're taking, going from words and talking to action with the consultations that you've mentioned, with the survey, and with coming up with the statement, and then outcomes, specific outcomes. So bless you and all the work you're doing in SDG 17, which is about partnerships for action. There's always a place for music and art and dance and movement in all of this progression of sustainable development. If societies are going to be better and serve their citizens, that art and expression is so important. This is something that's gaining a great deal of attention throughout the United Nations system and throughout the world. This is really more about cultural diplomacy. And so in this special webinar, we are going to have a musical interlude. So I'm going to hand it over to an incredible musician and internationally acclaimed composer and pianist and singer and songwriter, who happens to be one of my former students and my best friend, and the co-founder with me of a band that writes original anthems. His name is Russell Daisy. One of those original anthems you will hear after he describes it a bit.
Thank you, Dr. Judy. Dr. Judy was my professor at Columbia University, and the first thing we did was I was assigned in her class to write a song about 9/11, and it was to heal the hearts of New Yorkers. We later healed the hearts of those poor people in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince, gone through that terrible earthquake, and yes, later into the decade, Sierra Leone certainly has been represented here, and Dr. Kuryansky is obviously an advisor to the government and to the mission, suffered from Ebola. And one way to touch the hearts of the people of Sierra Leone, as she mentioned, she went to Sierra Leone, to Freetown specifically, working with burial teams. Can you imagine? Was to uplift these people with a song that was based on a native African tune, which we retooled to help heal the hearts and to buoy the spirits of people in the middle of Ebola. The song is called Hope is Alive.
Seen so much and felt so much, but even though the road ahead may look rocky, let us all remember that we are survivors. Yes, I'm a Sierra Leonean, a true Sierra Leonean. Yes, I've gone through war and I survived. Yes, I've gone through pain, I've gone through shame, but I'm a survivor, so I survived. Now there is Ebola threatening my nation, a silent killer with a mean spirit to break us apart, to keep us apart. But we are survivors, so we will survive. We gotta dance together, dance together. Oh, he's alive. We gotta rock together, rock together. Oh, he's alive. We gotta sing together, sing together. Oh, he's alive. We gotta laugh together, love each other. Oh, he's alive. I help you, you help me. Oh, he's alive. He helps her, she helps him. Oh, he's alive. We gotta dance together, dance together. Oh, he's alive. We gotta rock together, rock together. Oh, he's alive. We gotta sing together, sing together. Oh, he's alive. We gotta laugh together, love each other. Oh, he's alive. We gotta kick Ebola, kick Ebola. Oh, he's alive. We gotta fight Ebola, fight Ebola. Oh, he's alive. Oh, sweet Mama Salome, we still have hope. And once the sun they rise, Salome will rise again. Hope is still alive. Hope is alive. We still have hope. Hope is alive.
Thank you so much for that song. I always get so moved by hearing that. And every time I go actually back to Sierra Leone, those who were in that video sing that song back to me. So the point that I wanted to raise about that is that it resonates so much, gets deep in the soul, and is so appropriate in so many different situations. Even though it was at the Ebola time, we're going through different crises, and that song is useful in so many different ways. And with regard to students, particularly when I play that song in educational settings, which is the topic of this webinar, that students and young people get so energized by it. So hope is alive is relevant for all progress in all ways in our moving ahead for social development. You've heard from some experts clearly in our opening plenary session, and now we turn to our roundtable of those who are going to offer some amazing solutions in all the work that they were doing. Our moderator for this, leader of this roundtable, is someone who's very special to me also, who was a star student of mine at Columbia University Teachers College in my class on psychology in the United Nations, Ziva Bakker, who has earned her master's degree in the program on international and comparative education. And Ziva is a major youth advocate at the United Nations on practically all the SDGs that she knows about. And I'm proud to say that she is working with me on promoting education for all, mental health, and cultural diplomacy in her role as a policy representative for the International Association of Applied Psychology, where she reports about UN forums, including what some of you know about, the UN General Assembly, the Commission on the Status of Women, and many others. And she knows a lot about government policy that we've heard some about in this webinar, and also wears another civil society hat as the founder of the Bakker Foundation, which is a family foundation serving marginalized populations and promoting cultural diplomacy and education for all. So she's perfect to moderate this roundtable. Over to you, Ziva.
Thank you so much, Dr. Judy, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Zebra, and I'll be chairing the roundtable discussion on multi-stakeholder solutions. Today's conversation matters because we need to move beyond platitudes about access and inclusion. The adoption of the Doha Declaration yesterday is a step in the right direction. We need to examine what value actually means, not just in economic returns, but personal growth, civic engagement, and the creation of truly equitable pathways. And what we need to explore for what all really means in practice, not just in mission statements. And with that being said, I'm honored to be joined by these distinguished speakers who will bring diverse perspectives from across the higher education landscape. We'll explore how institutions can rebuild trust, remove barriers, measure impact, and ultimately ensure how higher education's promise becomes a reality for everyone, not just the privileged few. So let's dive right in. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Megha Sood, who is a senior science officer at the International Science Council, where she is responsible for the council's work on climate change policy, human development, science funding, and the enhancing of the role of social sciences and sustainable development policies. She has previously worked as a policy advisor, a program officer, and a lot more at the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the International Energy Agency as well, and the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Her interdisciplinary research background lies in climate change policy and the interface between development and environmental change. Megha, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Zira, and thank you for inviting me to present today. It's hard to go after that wonderful song, but I'll try my best to be at least half as perky. So I'm here to talk about a long exercise that we've gone through with our members. For those of you who don't know, the International Science Council is a member-based science organization, and we represent national members, which are the science academies, research councils, but also international disciplinary unions and associations. So we're really representing the science community. And several years ago, we gathered what we call the Global Forum of Funders, which are science funders. And the question we said to them, what they said to us really after the meeting was, we're funding all of this science aimed at SDGs, and yet we are so far from meeting the target. So what's going on? What's the disconnect, and how can we fix it? And in response, our community came up with two reports called Unleashing Science, which advocated a mission approach to science, saying you have to have long-term funding for sustainability research. You have to support that research, and they called it a moonshot. So if you want to go to the moon, you build a mission around it, give it the institutional and financial security to be able to achieve that. And then we have the Global Commission of Science for Sustainability that was tasked with answering the question, okay, how do we do this if that's what we want science to achieve for SDG attainment? And the response was that actually going to the moon is quite easy if you compare it to achieving SDGs, which are far more complex. It's not one aim, but many. And every action you take has spillover effects. So if you look at it in terms of silos, so if you're fixing climate change or looking at food or energy problems, that's not enough. What you have to do is get into the messiness of the nexus issues, which are cross SDG, cross-sectoral, cross-stakeholder. And science is not incentivized to do that, and we're not financed to do that, because we are assessed according to the publications that we have in high impact factor journals. We are assessed according to our institutional background. We are working in project-based funding where we don't really have the time or the resources to engage with the issues and the communities that we are hoping to serve. And so the argument really is to have this transdisciplinary, mission-oriented science. We call it flipping the science model, because here really how you do the science is more important than what you're trying to achieve at the end. It's the process of doing transdisciplinary science, which is to co-define the problem, co-create the solutions, and co-implement it with various stakeholders, including policymakers, embedded in the societies that they serve, that we're trying to enable with that model. And now the question really is, can higher education institutions and research performing organizations serve that function of being the space of boundary spanning organizations which house researchers that have a different skill set, that are trained in negotiation, have ethical training, are able to look at power dynamics and see how complex issues can be served from different angles, have specific consideration for vulnerabilities and disenfranchised parts of the community. Scientists are not often trained or incentivized to do that kind of long trust building work that it takes to do this kind of transdisciplinary work. So the challenge for universities is to become those kinds of mission-oriented, transdisciplinary space which house various kinds of stakeholders doing science together in order to really meet sustainability goals. I'll stop there, but I'm happy to take questions after.
No, thank you, Megha. And I think that's what you said. I think the hub is that education is transforming, and education institutions need to evolve to not just teach the education, but also follow into policy. So with that being said, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Patrick Paul Walsh, the man behind the show here. He's primarily responsible for getting this whole thing sorted out. So Patrick is the Vice President of Education and Director of the SDG Academy at the UN Sustainability Development Solutions Network. He is on the secondment of the University College Dublin, where he remains a full professor of global affairs and sustainable futures and director of the UCD MS program in sustainability development in partnership with the SDG Academy. He has also held positions at the UN, the European Commission, IMF, and the World Bank. He is currently focused on sustainable development education that is informed by science, practice, and policy. Patrick, please take it away.
No, thank you for the very kind introduction. So today I'm going to be relatively brief. So I just want to do a little bit of marketing first. At the Academy, we did a course on revitalizing collateral for a sustainable future, which actually tracked the policy briefs and the discussions up to the summit of the future. And we also took all the topics that were there, or the action plans, and we overlaid them on a series of academic lectures that gave some sort of academic foundation and knowledge behind each and all of that document. It turns out that this document is the one that the UN are going to use to go to 2030 in terms of implementing the SDGs. Also, it'll be used for reform of the UN itself. Its agenda, the UN 80 agenda, and finally, from 2027, it outlines how the HLPF, under the auspices of the General Assembly, will start a process for 3 years to talk about the post-2030 agenda. And in some ways, we're going to target the type of conversations we're having now about higher education and about the role we can play up to 2030 and beyond 2030. Now, I did update this course for the World Social Summit, and I've included 3 more modules on poverty eradication, on decent work and productive work, and on social integration, so you can read that. And I do want to say just one thing before we you can go on to the next slide, actually. One thing that could have been disappointing when we were looking at Pact for the Future was how well education was represented, and particularly lifelong learning, or education for sustainable development, or peace education, or greening of education. And the conclusion is that it wasn't represented brilliantly in Pact for the Future. But if you actually look at the references to the Transforming Education Summit, if you look at the references to the midpoint review, which is the statement that's up now on your screen, it was actually quite strong. And particularly when you went into the Digital Global Compact, there was a good piece on curriculum and education, a bit STEM orientated, but still it was quite good. Just to tell you, the Doha Political Declaration of the World Social Summit, which has just been approved a couple of days ago, there are 27 references to education, and they're interesting in that, you know, access, increase the quality of education, invest more in education at all levels, have lifelong learning, be more careful about language and cultures, careful about gender, digital, financing, and all of these things we've talked about. But if you actually put the term green into the document, there's nothing. Sustainable development comes out once in the document, and environment is only mentioned once in the document, but not related to education. But again, I would say that in terms of our guiding star up to 2030 and beyond, I still think this is part of a bigger package in our common agenda to Secretary General. And all of it in the course I did is map back into the action plans of Pact for the Future, which I've said I already mapped back into the Transforming Education Summit and the midpoint review. So I think there's something in it for everyone. And I think education for sustainable development or greening of education is very much alive. Okay, so that's just my first point. Next slide. Just to back up His Excellency Jamal from MBRF about knowledge. Knowledge is not necessarily virtue, meaning that it's not necessarily for the public good. And we have to be very careful about how it's created and how it's accessed and how open it is. So I wrote this in AIU a few years ago. You can have a look at that and the next slide. But one of the projects that we are doing with UNESCO is we have a joint committee with UNESCO under information communications called the Joint Committee on Open Education Resources. So this is a wonderful document that was signed by all nations in November 2019, all members, all countries. And this is the idea that education resources should be created, you know, with equity for the public good, and should be free and open to everyone across the world. And this is the ambition of the Open Education Resource, or the Open OER Recommendation 219. Next slide. One of the works of the committee working with MBRF is we had the third World OER Congress in Dubai last November 24th. It's already a year. And the idea was to take stock of emerging technologies like AI and to see whether these could be used as a tool to advance the idea of open education, but also to advance the idea in our new digital revolution. Maybe there's nowhere on the earth, even in refugee camps, that you cannot potentially access education and get accredited for education if we put our minds to it in terms of using emerging technologies towards creating resources, but also training teachers, giving access to resources and exams and accreditation at all levels of learning. And I know this was the ambition that we talked about with Sierra Leone, or talked about Mr. Ba, about the digital commons that we will do in the University College Dublin. Next slide. So with that, next slide. Yeah, just one thing I want to say, that, you know, when people are talking about how do you provide free open education resources, and it is in theory possible, and the policy framework has to be right, funding frameworks have to be right, but just to show one little project we did in the Joint Committee is we got the rights to Dublin University Press, which was founded in 1734, and we show how we run that as a community journal with all, if you like, the principles and standards of the OER and using the Dubai Declaration as well. Now, I don't have time to go into it, but at least we're walking the talk and showing how we can do publications. So we have a publication from SDSN, which is their annual SDS Sustainable Development Report. This is the SDG dashboard. We've done a book on insurance and the SDGs and many other things, but it's just to show that it is possible for communities to publish, to create material at the best standards, academic standards, and to archive them in a library to the best standards, and to make it free to create, free to use, and have it archived at best standards, and put in the best AI handles possible around, and licensing and other things into the platform. It's just to show, to have a demo to show governments, you should not be giving this to commercial companies. This can be done within the state for a low price if you actually follow the playbook that we're actually recommending for all schools and universities and corporates and governments everywhere to have open education resources and accreditation. So I'll leave it there, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I mean, I'm going to help you with your marketing a bit. If you guys are here in Doha, please do check out his exhibition booth. STSN does have an exhibition booth, so please do drop by. And thank you, Patrick. I think the moral is that we're going to count on you to advocate for education at the UN. We're behind, as you mentioned, we're not there, but we have people like him that are doing very well. And I think that it's a great segue into our next speaker. So you can't talk about transforming education without mentioning AI. And that's where Dr. Sri Yashwat Tajimala comes in. He is currently serving as a Computing Innovation Fellow focused on AI education at the Computing Research Association in Washington, D.C. At UNC Charlotte, he contributes to NSF-funded research projects. As a global focal point for the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth Science Policy Interface, Dr. Yash advocates globally for equitable access to STEM education, mental health, gender and sexual reproductive rights, and sustainable human-centered technology development and deployment. I know it's a mouthful. He's clearly an advocate and a trailblazer in his field, so please educate us all.
Thank you so much. I am very grateful for the opportunity to present today, and also kudos to all the speakers who came before, because it really takes an intergenerational and multi-stakeholder support and solidarity to get anything meaningful done in this world. And we need all hands on deck. And I'm going to present a little bit about how higher education and youth activism and advocacy efforts, both nationally and in the multilateral processes, intersect, and how they can empower each other. And as you mentioned, I'll bring in a lot. I will bring in the scientist, educator, youth activist, and various other hats that I that I hold. And especially in the context of social development, one of the things that we've been advocating for is that in a world of complex challenges and polycrisis, true empowerment of youth must move beyond just providing resources or trainings. It should be about cultivating agency, amplifying voice, and sharing power. And oftentimes, young people are excluded from the design phase of programs and policies that directly affect them. They're brought in afterwards as a consultations or stakeholders that give feedback on the process. I'm going to plug in today as a solution, a mechanism that was initiated by the Major Group for Children and Youth, which is a network of formal, informal, child-led, youth-led, and child and youth-serving federations, unions, organizations, and associations across the world that engage with the UN, but also national and regional youth forums and mechanisms to make sure young people are able to meaningfully engage with the processes. And it's a huge network, but the solution that I'm going to focus on today is the science policy interface. And why it is important and how science policy interface is actually supported infrastructurally by higher education. The science policy interface was created in 2016 in alignment with the UN ECOSOC's mandate to strengthen science, technology, innovation mechanisms within the UN processes, but also global governance. And the youth element of it is that we focus on building tools to drive evidence-informed, context-specific, and appropriate technology-oriented innovation solutions that are generated by young people in their communities and highlighting them at the global level. And oftentimes the three SDGs, while we focus on all the SDGs, the three SDGs that are at the forefront of our platform are SDG 4, 8, and 9, which is a great synergy for higher education institutions. And these are some of the mechanisms that we've been involved in the UN ECOSOC process, but specifically, as you mentioned, AI and digital technologies, over the last 2 years, the Science Policy Interface has engaged over 700 young people in all of the processes that I'm showing on the screen. This takes a whole team across the world working 24 hours. And we've also had the opportunity to build relationships with many UN entities, to work on digital literacy, to work on AI education infrastructure, to work on open source access to journals, which are oftentimes behind paywalls. We are also working on AI safety and responsibility and impact initiatives that various countries are leading. And how are we doing it? Where does the higher education come into the picture? Oftentimes we see there's 4 ways that young people in higher education spaces intersect and empower each other. The first is in the classroom as a training ground for policy. And I know Dr. Patrick mentioned earlier, oftentimes the most immediate way to empower young people is to provide them skills and trainings on how they can translate their expertise into global governance context. The second is, and I think Megha mentioned a little bit earlier, is that in the research ecosystem, how are we co-designing with young people? I've rarely met faculty or professors who design research studies talking to students as co-designers. They often bring in the students as users or participants, but if we change the paradigm, what will the problems that we look at change? Because the problems that young people are looking at are very different than the problems that the past generations have had to address. And it's important that they address those challenges, because technology is creating new challenges that require technological solutions. And the third one is as a catalyst for trust and dialogue. And I think Judy mentioned it earlier, and Catherine mentioned, there is a sense of trust that higher education institutions have built over the last few centuries. But in an environment where rising authoritarianism is attacking higher education institutions, what does that interface look like between science policy interface and higher education institutions? And how are higher education institutions actually creating intergenerational spaces for those dialogues? Just publishing in journals is not enough. We have to go to the community. We have to build forums for dialogues on how research is actually going to help the world be a better place. And the last thing is, as knowledge hubs, there is a role of as custodians and curators of truth. But what is that truth? Is that truth a Western-centric oriented truth, or is it truth that includes indigenous context? Is it truth that centers global South perspectives? And I think to conclude, oftentimes higher education agenda, historically at least, this is a critique, sorry, to the other speakers, the focus is on the next generation workforce from a very economic standpoint, or creating the leaders for the next generation future. And oftentimes institutions choose between those two. And what we are saying is you don't have to choose them. There's a way to merge them together, and it is through 4 paradigms, from going from teaching to partnering, empowering young people as knowledge creators and co-designers, empowering young people irrespective of the discipline to go into policy. We need more people to go into policy. And to empower young people to be social changers within their communities through entrepreneurship, innovation, and getting into local government. And with that, I give back time to you, and thank you.
Thank you. So I guess what I heard was collaboration. Being at the UN, I think what we heard was collaboration. And I think the Secretary General probably heard your speech before you said it, because he's a big advocate for the youth. I mean, he did say that every panel at the United Nations does need to have a youth representative. So I do think that getting involved and collaborating is the future. So thank you, Yash. You've been a great youth advocate on this platform as well. And now let me take it to our last speaker, Dr. Ayman Al-Bakarati, who is an associate professor at Majman University and director of CFEL at Saudi Arabia, affiliated with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. He holds a PhD in computational science and engineering from North Carolina AT&T University. His research interests span AI modeling, strategic foresight, and sustainable development. Dr. Al-Barkati has contributed to national initiatives aligned with Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 and has led programs at the intersection of innovation, quality assurance, and educational policy.
Thank you.
Please,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this very kind introduction. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, friends. It's really great honor to join you virtually from Saudi Arabia at the historic gathering, the World Summit for Social Development, where we reaffirm that education is not only a public good, but humanity's most powerful instrument for inclusive futures. I speak on behalf of Unitarian CFEL Saudi Arabia, which has been hosted here in Majma University, to introduce a transformative initiative that is reshaping how higher education leads global change, the Leap Fast leadership program co-developed by Unitarian and UNESCO. Leap Fast, which is Leaders in Higher Education Alliance and Program for Accelerating Sustainability Transformation, was born from a simple yet profound idea. If universities are engines of knowledge, then their leaders must be the architects of the transformation. At its core, Leap Fast mobilizes rectors, deans, and faculty from every region of the world to move beyond incremental change and drive whole institution transformations, embedding the Sustainable Development Goals into education, research, operations, and community life. It's not a conference, it's a movement, a new leadership culture in higher education aligned with UNESCO Education for Sustainable Development ESD 2030 framework and the Pact for the Future being adopted by the UN. So the Leap Fast operate into four main interconnected pillars. The first one is leadership dialogue, convened each July at the United Nations High-Level Political Forum in New York, co-hosted by Unitarian UNESCO and the Permanent Mission of Saudi Arabia. Their university presidents and ministers co-create global joint statement on how higher education accelerates the SDGs. The second pillar is certificate program. It's a 3-month blended course that empower faculty teams to redesign curricula and institutional strategies for sustainability. Participants engaged in a self-paced e-learning, international peer learning, and a 5- and 6-day in-person co-creation workshop in Saudi Arabia. This year been hosted in Majma University in Saudi Arabia. Then the third pillar is the SDG Ambassadors Program. A graduate then mentor colleagues and implement measurable SDG actions across their institutions, becoming living catalysts of change. Fourth, the regional and national spin-off, where universities replicate the model either nationally or even regional, engaging ministers, accreditation bodies, and industry partners. Through these components, Leap Fast turns the idea of sustainability from a project into a governance mindset, a shared DNA of institutional life. So in the first cycle, Leap Fast has connected universities from over 25 countries, from Canada to Kenya, the Philippines to Mauritius, and Saudi Arabia to Senegal, forming an alliance of transformation. Our 2024 Leadership Dialogue Joint Statement adopted the UN called Universities Living Laboratories of the Future of Society. That message resonant across the UN agencies and governments, positioning higher education as a vital partner in a multilateral cooperation. By 2025, the program has trained and networked more than many of the higher education leaders and faculty, producing institutional action plans that directly advance Vision 2030 SDG 4 in quality education, SDG 9 on innovation, and SDG 17 on partnerships. And this is only the beginning. The second edition currently underway bring together educators from under theme reimagining the higher education for sustainable tomorrow. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, through Majma University, is proud to serve as the first host of this program in the world. CIFAL Saudi Arabia has built the model from the national framework empowering universities to implement the SDGs. Now codified, we are working in issuing our guiding strategy for empowering universities to advance the SDGs. This framework aligns every campus initiative with the Vision 2030 human capital and innovation goals, transforming universities into agents of sustainable progress and partners of the United Nations systems. It demonstrates that when a university anchors itself in global cooperation, it can amplify both national pride and international purpose. What makes Sleep Fast extraordinary is not only its structure, but its spirit. It brings together academics, policymakers, and youth from every continent who share a single belief that the classroom can shape civilization. One participant from East Africa said, "For the first time, I see my university is not as an island, but as a part of the world's solution." That is the heartbeat of the Leap Fast, a platform where knowledge meets purpose and leadership becomes service. As we gather under the banner of the World Summit for Social Development, Leap Fast invites every university, every educator, every student to take the leap. A leap of imagination, of leadership, and of a faith in our collective capacity to build inclusive future for all. Thank you so much.
And thank you to all our distinguished speakers for everything you've said. I think the sum of it is the future of higher education must be grounded in purpose. And I think we all need to commit to a model of education that responds directly to the needs of the people and the planet. And I think that means preparing and empowering ethical leaders, fostering inclusive development, and aligning our teaching, research, and outreach with the urgent goals of sustainability and equity. Thank you to all. I hope this was beneficial to you all. And now I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Judy.
What an amazing roundtable and a great job you just did, Ziva. At this stage, I must say that this webinar is delivering on the UN Secretary General's mandate about youth at the table, because we've had a few, including you, Ziva, who just get under the wire, delivering on the regional representation the UN wants with the North and the South and the different countries we've heard from, Sierra Leone and Saudi and UAE, delivering on gender, that we've had men and women on this particular webinar, and delivering on the multi-stakeholders. We've had government, we have UN agencies, civil society, and academia, which is what this is about, education. Academia has a big voice to play here, and delivering on the mission of this webinar to show how education has a right and a responsibility as a seat at the table for the solution for social development. And for more about the closing remarks, we turn to Jaishra Wyatt, the Chief of Education Outreach in the UN Department of Global Communications, that is at the United Nations, and has the overview of everything that is going on, including the topics of all the SDGs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Judy, and really thank you so much to Paul Walsh and Helen at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network for bringing us all together. This afternoon, I am joining you from New York, from headquarters at the United Nations, and I really just second everything Dr. Judy just said. What a powerful set of interventions and ideas that have been shared here this morning. As Dr. Judy said, my name is Jayashri Wyatt. I'm the Chief of Education Outreach in the Department of Global Communications at the United Nations headquarters in New York. And it is just really a privilege to have heard all of the ideas and the solutions that were posited by the speakers in this really important side event at the World Social Summit for Development, under the title Higher Education's Value Proposition for Inclusive Futures for All. And I think the United Nations value proposition is that we value each and every human being. Each and every human being has the right to dignity, peace, and equity on a healthy planet. And as many of you pointed out, we're at the 10-year mark in the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. And as Dr. Judy pointed out at the beginning, most of these SDGs are not on track. And so we recognize, I think, in higher education that the Sustainable Development Goals are not just on paper. These are existentially important to our survival as human beings, as a human family. And that is the value proposition that the UN brings to the table with the 2030 agenda. As Dr. Katrin Cole pointed out as well, education and SDG number 4 and education for sustainability, as well as quality education and lifelong learning, has been recognized by the General Assembly as the key enabler of all of the other SDGs. So this is a really important role, and it's a really important responsibility that educators have. And I submit to you that higher education and the scientific community play an absolutely critical and pivotal role in being able to bring about and realize the Sustainable Development Goals as they have been formulated by the member states. We're not always given the space that higher education, I think, deserves and the scientific community deserves. And that's part of why I think this particular discussion is so important, looking at social development as well. As we can't implement the SDGs without education and higher education playing a crucial role, we also cannot make social development happen without higher education's role. This is a transformative proposition. And to be educated is to be transformed. But I think we have to ask ourselves, as we're trying to do the how-to of transformation, what does that look like? And what kind of transformation are we actually educating for? And I think, Dr. Megasud also made a good point that scientists are not incentivized, actually, in the way that they might be. And I think, Yash, you also mentioned some really critical points about how do we actually do co-production of knowledge? How do we actually do co-creation and design with young people to ensure that their voices are at the table through the entire process? So education itself is transformative. We need access to that education, as many of you have pointed out. And we need equity, as Paul was pointing out, with open education resources. So many incredible points that were made today in the discussion. But the main thing that I want to leave you with is that we have a responsibility in higher education. We have a crucial role, and we must look at how higher education can transform itself as we seek to create transformative experiences for the young people who are in our institutions, if we are going to be able to make the transformations that the entire SDG agenda is calling for. So I thank each and every one of you for the extraordinary solutions that you have recommended. And we look forward to working very closely with you from the United Nations Academic Impact, which I am overseeing here at headquarters. We work with over 1,800 universities in over 160 countries, helping universities to reorient themselves towards sustainability. So again, thank you so much to all of the stakeholders who were part of this conversation. We look forward to working with you more in the future. Thank you.
Jayashree, I think you have done your great job of wrapping up so well. You obviously were listening well to everyone to be able to summarize what they said. That is a key in a good educator, is to listen and then to be able to comprehend and speak about what everyone else is thinking, besides giving information, also taking information in. And thank you, Jayashree, for being able to express appreciation to everyone. And we include those of you who are joining us online. We've certainly been well educated by all of the speakers here. And we welcome you in participating now, as Jayashree said, and as certainly the Sustainable Development Solutions Network would say, in participating in everything that you've heard about in the surveys, in the discussions, in the statements that are going to be prepared. And so the SDSN will certainly oversee that. So bless you all, and thank you and for joining us here from Doha, Qatar.
So Dr. G, just one more thing that you left out. So we have to give a big digital applause for Dr. Judy for her wonderful sharing, and also for our musician, Russell, and for Ziver. And I think the biggest applause goes to Helen from the Academy, who brought us all together and did the run of show and made sure everything was good. And we will answer all the questions actually that people were asking. I'll sit down and I'll write to you, and we'll send you all the resources for everyone who came and everyone who registered. So with that, good night. See you soon.